Well, when I was 6, I remember going to the park alone and I was swinging on the swing. And I still remember to this day that I was wearing pink checkered shorts and a man drove up in a brown car and he kidnapped me. He said if I ever told anyone, he would come and get me. Obviously, I'm here today. I was dropped off at the park at some point. The neighbors found me there, and I got in trouble for that experience. I remember my stepmother, she was angry at me. I don't know why, but it wasn't addressed. And so I internalized that I did something wrong.
What did you lose?
My voice. And that has been a huge theme in my recovery today. Finding that voice and using it.
When you tried to use your voice, you weren't heard in the most acute situation and tender part of your life.
I think so. I think it was more than the act itself.
Yep.
It was the aftermath and the lack of being heard. And even to this day, I struggle with asking for what I need. And that's been a huge part of my recovery and such a gift and such a process. Something I never thought was possible.
Welcome to Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer. I'm your host. And as you can tell, we are not in our normal studio. We're back out here in LA. And I couldn't be more excited to be here with one of my new friends and such a lovely human being, author, Hannah Sward. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Patrick. It's such an honor to be asked. Yeah. Invited.
I can't, as we always do, we had some pre-show talk and had to kind of pump the brakes a little bit because we always want the conversation to be authentic when the cameras are rolling. So I'm really excited to get to talk about all the things we've been waiting to talk about.
I feel
now.
like that. Okay, let's just, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. You're originally from Canada. Mm-hmm. You were born there?
Yeah. Yeah.
How long did you live in Canada?
I grew up for the first 9 years in Victoria, British Columbia,
okay.
And then my dad and family, we moved to Toronto. And then when I was in high school, we moved to the States.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what did your dad, was your moving, correlated to your dad's job?
My dad was a poet.
Oh.
And so we moved around a lot. It was a very colorful, chaotic upbringing.
That sounds so odd for a poet. Sorry, insert but there.
Yeah, you mean lack of stability? I know that is. Yeah.
I mean, every way a professional poet has been portrayed to me, and because I don't really have any close people in my life who are professional poets, but Hollywood has showed,
Yes.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Actually, it sounds like you didn't move enough.
Yes, that's true. Well, within that we did, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just comparing to the Hollywood.
road, to living on the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But that's the upbringing you knew. So it's people always ask me about stuff with my childhood and, they were like, well, how did you like this or that? Things that were, whatever. I'm like, it's what I knew, how do you know if
right.
you don't?
Yeah.
And the grass is always greener on the other side. So you think,
the
opposites.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So would you describe your childhood as do you have fond memories or was it difficult?
It was definitely challenging. I used the word colorful a little bit ago, and it was definitely colorful, and I'm grateful for that aspect. It was unconventional, Bohemian, 70s and 80s. And especially growing up in a family of artists, I mean, there really was that lack of stability. And as, I grew up with my father. My mother left when I was 2. And that really set me up for that feeling of, it was challenging right there, not having that mother figure, although I did see her every summer. It was definitely a challenging childhood. And I always remember when I was 9, and I don't know why, I remember thinking if I were to die now, my life has been full, which is obviously a strange thing for a 9-year-old to think. But full life by 9.
When you think, so clearly this is it's a theme that you've thought about multiple times before. And I'm curious if you asked yourself and have been able to figure out, was that in some way, like where did you pick up, was that modeled for you? The thought process of reflecting on living enough or doing enough in an amount of time is what equates to death being acceptable at whatever age.
I haven't actually thought about that. I mean, not in the terms, not that clearly as you're asking it. So I really, really value and love that question. I think, one, because my father was so prolific, he was always writing, that's what was modeled, that the creative, constantly being creative was really raised high.
That's how your value came about in life.
Yeah.
Of existence. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And it still is. It's something I still struggle with. Am I doing, and absolutely, we live in a society that feeds that. Am I doing enough? But of course that looks different for everyone. And artistically, that's what it is. It's not necessarily associated with money and all of that. But I think we all have I'll speak for myself, my standard, which I struggle with.
Well, and I think that, where somebody could listen and be like, oh, I'm not a creative, I work in a corporate job. Like that does relate to you. And I'm going to tell you how, because we all have, no matter whether you're a creative or you are, in business, corporate, we're talking about how much we produce and relating it to our value that we're bringing to the table. And, whether or not we get to check off each day that we did enough, am I enough? And
that's it. That's under everything. Am I enough? Am I doing enough? Am I all of that? Yes.
So that was a pretty core thing for me from an early age.
Yeah.
So 9 years old. You felt like you had done enough?
I mean, I don't know if I felt like I did enough, but I was well aware that my life when I saw my peers, they had lived in the same house all their life, that my father, we were always doing something different, growing up on different islands. We lived on a commune.
When you say commune, were you part of a cult?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I had to ask. I'm sorry if that felt insensitive, but
no, not at all. It's a big thing right now.
Yes.
I mean, not that it's have lived in a cult.
We're all fascinated by
yeah.
Especially from a mental health perspective, and just we're all searching for connection or great increased connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that is fascinating, to look at the different ways that people live alternatively.
Right.
That's where I go with, so.
Yes. And this was an alternative way of living. I mean, when we moved to the States, I was 14 or 15, and we moved up to the Santa Cruz Mountains, 3,000 miles up.
Wow.
And my high school was a private high school, and there was 10 of us in the whole high school. So it was a different experience coming from Toronto. Yeah. And going back to what you're saying about the alternative or about the cult. I mean, it wasn't a cult, but there was this aspects of my father wanted to move there to be connected. Right?
Yeah. So I would think that anybody feels like, oh, I've lived a full, it's a combination of okay, I've checked off experiences that are meaningful, but also I have a complete sense of connection. Did you feel that at 9 years old, that you were like?
No, I felt completely disconnected. I don't remember a time where I ever did feel connected. And I think that goes to speaking about the not enoughness. Am I enough? And trying to connect desperately to something. But throughout my whole life, really, and it played out later in my addiction, taking actions that proved otherwise, right? That fed the not enoughness, because how could I be enough if I'm doing this? And that fed the self-hatred. And so no, I definitely did not feel connected. And not only that, it was like, it was so lonely. And I just didn't know how to, as I hear with many people, to connect with people. And it was scary. And I just felt so much more comfortable under the bleachers at school, right? And then later in my addiction, I was a big bathroom girl. From under the bleachers to the bathrooms.
So isolation was one of your first safety coping mechanisms.
Definitely. Hiding who I was, hiding that I was stealing. I was a big thief from the age of 6. Hiding this deep sense of shame about who I was, which started, I do think that my mother leaving, even though I would see her every summer, it fed that like shame of not enoughness. And then there were things that happened in my childhood that confirmed that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and there's the whole thing about confirmation bias too, that like, not taking away from there were probably legitimate things right in your childhood but even when like one thing happens, even if there was not really anything legitimately like we trace back in so many people I've talked to, and they're like, it doesn't matter if you have real confirmation or not. The confirmation bias that exists is going to, for a developing child, reaffirm that message over and over and over.
Right.
Can I ask you, what were those things specifically for you that gave you that confirmation? Of
course. Yeah. Well, when I was 6, I spent, as I was saying, a lot of time alone. And my parents, my father, and then I also, by that point, had a stepmother as artists. And I don't necessarily think it was because they were artists. As well-intentioned as they may have been, they were really absorbed in their own world. So I was off on my own. And of course, this also was a different time where maybe kids went to the park alone. I don't think so even then. But I remember going to the park alone, and I was swinging on the swing. And I still remember to this day that I was wearing pink checkered shorts, and a man drove up in a brown car, and he kidnapped me. And this was a time before Amber Alert. And he drove around, and he asked if I knew how babies were made. And he said if I ever told anyone, he would come and kill me. Now, what happened from that, obviously I'm here today. I was dropped off at the park at some point, and the neighbors found me there. And I got in trouble for that experience. And I remember... Did you convey what had happened? Like, were you in trouble because they were like, where were you? And you didn't, or did you tell them what happened? I actually have no memory of my father. I always thought he was in India with the guru at this point. But I remember my stepmother, she was angry at me. And at 6 years old, I don't know if it's because, I don't know why. Perhaps fear, but it wasn't addressed. And so I internalized that I did something wrong, right? I was bad. And what came of that were I started having nightmares. And I think it really, that was one thing. And more things happened, but that was the start.
So you got returned to the park. You told what happened, and what you received was discipline for something that wasn't your fault.
Yeah.
Aside from what you got, what did you lose?
Innocence. I lost any sense of safety. I think the biggest thing, there was two things. I mean, many things, but my voice. My voice. And that it's been a huge theme in my recovery today, finding that voice and using it. And the other is, it really influenced I never had kids, and that was a big part of it.
Sure.
The nightmares from that about giving birth when I was 6, I think that was a huge part of not having kids. I was just frightened of the act of giving birth. Yeah.
I can't imagine. So you also mentioned that you started stealing at 6.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you remember what? Because that, I feel like people who, I mean, pretty much everybody I've talked to who's like, yeah, I stole for, whatever period of time, can always kind of like your first drink. You remember what? Did you remember what spurred it on?
Well, one, my dad really, I wasn't allowed sugar in the house, and I wanted it, and so I stole it. And I remember the first time that
a bag of granulated sugar or like candy?
Well, I remember I stole a chocolate bar, Milky Way. I think it was a Milky Way.
I picturing you in the giant bag, the paper bag of.
That was later when I had a little more savvy.
Oh my God!
Big bag of sugar. I wouldn't have put it past me though. But I remember the first time I did. I stole this chocolate bar and I walked outside with my stepmom, and it fell through my bell bottoms. I just remember that these bell bottoms, these corduroy bell bottoms, and the chocolate bar fell out through my pant leg onto the pavement. And she, was angry, and I was told to bring it back. And that was so a lot of chocolate bars I stole, a lot of chocolate bars. And then I remember there was no, similar to in my addiction, the consequences did not matter. I did it anyway, whether that was the entitlement, all the things behind it, and also we were, not that it justified stealing, but we didn't have much money.
Yeah.
And I remember stealing ballet tights on my way to ballet class once.
So, in talking about how you were stealing sweets, chocolate, candy bars, and that being the most common first thing that you were stealing, I'm curious about which of these was the more influential factor. Was it the buzz or the effect that you got from eating the sugar, or was it the buzz that you got from the act of stealing that gave you the medication that you needed at that time?
I don't know. I think the sugar, I really, really liked the sugar.
Yeah. Well, you didn't get what you needed when you asked for it. And you said one of the main thing you lost that day was your voice.
Right.
One could argue, was it the abuse? Or I would go to, probably all of the above, but even further, it's when you tried to use your voice, you weren't heard in the most acute situation and tender part of your life.
I think so. I think it was more than the act itself.
Yep.
It was the aftermath and the lack of being heard. And it's such a great point about, I never, even to this day, I struggle with asking for what I need and turning to myself and saying, well, what do I need here? right? And that's been a huge part of my recovery and such a gift and such a process, something I never thought was possible. And also comparing myself to other kids and what, I remember because ballet was a big part of my childhood, and the first time I got brought home in a cop car was when I was 9. And I remember it was a chocolate bar and ballet tights because I wanted ballet tights that didn't have holes in them. And so going back to not enough, I didn't feel enough with my ballet tights.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that maybe I am justifying it.
Yeah. I feel like there's an inherent understanding when you say that. Like, I don't even know that it needs just like, I can totally understand why those two things would be like, that wasn't that particular thievery in that moment. I don't think was the result of just mere kleptomania, right? People steal lighters or stuff they're not going to use all the time. And that's a derivative just directly from the buzz that they get from stealing, right? Did it ever get to a point where you were stealing things you didn't need?
In my adulthood.
Yeah.
And I would say even as a child, did I really need those tights?
Well,
yeah, you did.
You did.
You did think that's a sense of structure. Ballet is giving you a sense of structure.
Ooh, she's good.
Yeah.
I did ballet too. Like, you don't show up with a hair out of place. You don't show up with ripped tights.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The seams have to be in place. And I'm like, I look like a,
Yes.
Yes.
If you didn't hear, my producer just said that, ballet is a sense of structure. You don't show up with your hair out of place. You don't show up with a stitch, undone. Their perfection is expected. And
yeah.
So,
and I have to look the part in that class.
Yeah.
Or try to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Projection forward, because I know that's where we're going, for the theme. Oh, I know so many people could automatically relate with that, including myself right away, as you said it. Not the ballet tights, but the yes.
Yes. Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
At some point, stealing didn't do everything you needed.
Right.
What was that point?
That, I don't think it ever did do what I needed it to do.
I guess my question would be that when did more come into play? Because it wasn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, throughout my childhood, food was a theme. And from the youngest age, I remember when I would go visit my sister, we're very close, and we were close growing up, even though she was my half sister and we only spent summers together. Body and food were top of the list. What we looked like, what we consumed, what we didn't consume. So I think food was it was an obsession. And what we looked like, and fear of looking like our mother. She's very slender, but we really looked at her like, we were really, from a very young age, which is strange. We're like, we cannot have a butt like our mothers. And she's a beautiful woman that was like, even asked to be in Playboy. So it wasn't like she had, and I don't mean this as a judgment,
right.
But we were delusional, well into our adulthood.
Yeah.
Right. But that was a big thing. And dieting became big as well. And messages were certainly fed into that. Ballet didn't help. My mother, I remember the first time she saw me after I had gone through puberty or started puberty that particular year. Maybe I was 15, and she said 10 days of watermelon. And so I was very aware that what I eat. And so the more began with that. It could never be enough. I mean, I still to this day, I mean, I can't live with cookies in the house. They will be gone. They must be, yeah.
If at such a young and pivotal age, when you're supposed to be protected, you weren't. You tried to protect yourself, and the message was reinforced that you can't. The natural next step is control what you can.
Right. That's right.
What could you control?
What I ate and didn't eat, or tried to, and then I would feel out of control, which was really scary. The out of control.
What did the out of control look like?
Well, I would say it started in my late teens, these crazy diets of eating whatever I wanted and then starving for, 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, which I can't even fathom now. I cannot eat for a day,
If these folks here know, if I'm like missing a meal, if I'm 2 hours over a meal, somebody better be on Uber Eats.
Yeah. Yeah, before
that makes me sound like a diva. It's no, but it's like I start to like lose I like have anxiety. That's the thing. I'm not like,
Yeah, I feel out of body. Before I came, I'm like, you have some eggs because we don't want to float away my
Yes.
Yeah, but definitely the food with the binging wasn't a purger, but purging in the sense of diets, and really that lack of control. It was so scary to me, so scary, and this is what led me to my first drug. Was because of weight and trying to control and diets.
Let me guess, it was an amphetamine.
Yes, it was. Works wonders.
So it did the trick, huh?
It did the trick. Yeah, it was fen-phen, which was really big at the time. And that was my gateway drug.
How old were you?
I was 24. So a little bit of a late start.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah. I'm
so glad for many reasons to be sharing your story on our platform. But there are plenty of people who get a late start, but they think that there's a message that's told that it plays over in their head. We all think we're unique. Yeah. All of us that have substance use issues think our case is unique.
Yeah.
I have, I'm choosing to do this, yada, yada, yada. The stories go on. But I think one that I hear a consistent message from the people that start later is that, I kept going so long because how could I be if I was 24.
Right.
I was an adult.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
How quickly did it develop?
Well, I definitely became addicted to that right away. And that developed into, it got half of it, the fen or the it's fen, part of it. I don't know the fen or the fen got taken off the market. And so it didn't quite work as well.
You were only getting one fen.
Yeah, I was only getting one fen. And I'm like, this is
I immediately started to picture like a shark. Or wait, do sharks have fins on both sides? Okay, a dolphin with one fin. That's like
exactly
swimming
what
in
it
circles.
Was. Yeah.
Because
that was exactly it. And at the time, which is kind of a jump my sister and I were stripping in Los Angeles. And we looked a little more voluptuous, a little curvier than the other girls. And, or so we thought. And it's like, how do you guys maintain yourselves? And because we would try all these diets. We had the egg white diet, the potato diet, the frozen yogurt diet. I mean, we were constantly doing these crazy diets, like only potatoes all week, only rice. Like, I don't know where we came up with these ideas. or why eating a pint of ice cream yogurt a day would make us lose weight.
Right.
But I remember one girl or a few girls said, well, meth. We're like, meth? Huh. And meth and liposuction, they said. Like, let's try the liposuction first. Within a month, we were getting the liposuction. And then what happened is we were eating and we got these muffin tops. The muffin top effect.
Oh, because you gained fat above where you had been lipoed?
Yeah, we had gotten it in our butts and if I remember correctly, thighs. It was so long ago.
Yeah.
But and then we got these muffin tops, or what appeared to us as muffin
right.
tops. And we were so upset ourselves. Why didn't we have that surgeon point that needle up? Right? Our solution was, okay, now we try the meth. So my addiction to that, I first started meth when I was 24. It planted the seed. Oddly enough, we didn't lose any weight. We did for a month. I don't know how that's possible, but I will never forget the first time doing it on that Formica table in Los Feliz on the east side of, kind of east, not that you need to know where in Los Angeles, but I still specifically remember that Formica table, cutting up those lines, and it was on for me. The ritual, it was, and that burn. And because it didn't work, I didn't go back to that until in my later 20s, and never did take, poor thing, my sister, she didn't get that same obsession over it. But by my late 20s, that's when it took off.
So you did it for a month, hoping that it would work, waiting for it to, but then you stopped.
Yes, but I always remembered it.
Did you always remember? So did you have, was there did you bookmark the I love the way this makes my brain feel? Or did you love the way it made your brain feel?
I don't know if I loved the way it made my brain feel. Yeah, because it would never, for me, the using was never a party. I mean, I liked how clean my apartment was at first, but that quickly turned into unmanageability, and I was well aware of it.
When you say unmanageability, I know that you're talking about the usage, but are you also saying that it didn't, like, your apartment wasn't staying clean?
Well, the apartment was clean.
Oh, okay.
But the unmanageability was being at Home Depot, no judgment against this, but at 3 a.m. looking at doorknobs and taking apart doorknobs. That was very interesting to me. And trying to control and manage it, and really knowing that I couldn't. However, stopping when I did, the depression and the anxiety, the terror was so gripping that it was better I thought anything's better than this feeling. So I will use and run.
Was that what kept you, that's what kept you going once you picked it back up in your late 20s?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was a way of coping with a very difficult time at that point. I had what I consider, it wasn't technically diagnosed or clinically as a nervous breakdown, but something was triggered in me that I started having panic attacks and memories of the park. And my solution, not consciously, but my solution was meth.
I'm assuming it worked somewhat for a time.
Yeah, it did. It worked in the sense that I was confirming that I was unlovable, confirming the self-hatred I felt, confirming the shame. It also worked in terms of running away from whatever it was I was feeling. And that because I was so busy all the time.
Yeah.
And took me out of myself, which was took terrorizing because I knew that, and I knew I wasn't the woman that I wanted to be. Far from it.
Where did it, I mean, so we know you got sober. Where did it take you? Like what were the depths that you got to before getting sober?
Well, I had gone back to college, and my plan was I will finish college. I need meth to finish college. And all the bargains I made with myself once I graduate, and I graduated, and then I got this job, and I didn't quit. I'm like, I need it for my job, and I worked at this law school for 3 years, and I don't know what the bottom was, but there was a day where I stopped doing meth, and there was that window of grace. I remember when I was high, I really loved gardening. And I hate gardening, but on meth, it was very interesting to me, and especially the bougainvilleas. And if you know anything about bougainvilleas, it has the thorns. And I remember going out one morning into the backyard where there was the bougainvillea and just wrestling with it, like weeding. And I remember having to pee, and I was thirsty, and I was dizzy, but I could not stop. And this was morning, but it was late afternoon. I tore myself away. And I remember going to the bathroom and looking in the mirror, and it looked like a lion. You know, it looked like I had been attacked by a lion because, you know, my arms were bare, and they were just creased with
Scratches, blood.
Scratches all over. And I collapsed on the bathroom floor, and that was... You know, again, I don't know what the bottom, it was all a bottom for me, but there was something that shifted in that moment. And then at that point, I was probably about 35, 36, and I had never been a drinker. And within a few months, I started drinking wine. And I'm like, well, this is lovely. you know, I go to work, I come home from the law school, I have a glass of wine. And
where is this balance? This is the balance I've been looking for.
Exactly. Like, this is the solution.
Yeah.
And so quickly that one glass became a bottle, became 2 bottles. And I was so scared because I knew had just replaced the meth. And I don't know how I never got fired, but I quit that job because I found it very hard to show up to work sober. And my best thinking was to place an ad on Craigslist with my sister to be foot fetish dominatrix sisters, because then I wouldn't have to work. She also needed a job, and we're like, we love each other, we love being together, and we'll just have our feet done. And so that was my best thinking before I came in.
Wow.
And my last Thanksgiving was spent at a diner about a half a mile from here, Swingers, interviewing. It was Thanksgiving morning. We both went in our stilettos and leather skirts to interview a lawyer from Newport Beach, if he would be a potential client. What ended up happening was I didn't really do a good job of acting like a dominatrix. And my sister's like, "What happened to you? You were cowering like a shaking deer in the corner." But I did end up placing an ad on Craigslist to be what I considered it to be a sugar daddy, but it really was prostitution. So that was my bottom. And I had been in that business. I had been in the sex trade before. Years earlier when I was 19, going back to it in my later 30s, that was my bottom. Yeah.
You're taking us on a very emotional journey back to a place where I can tell you felt a lot of emotions and are feeling them right now.
Yeah.
Can you tell me?
Well, I think especially on with Thanksgiving just being last week, and bringing myself back there and where I am today. That was 14 or 15 Thanksgivings ago. It makes me so sad. It makes me so sad for who I was and that I was so hopeless and had no belief in myself. And so talking about that makes me sad, and then also filled with the gratitude of what became possible. And talking about my using, it makes me think of all the women and the men, all people that I've met along the way that felt similarly, that I've gotten to connect with, that like right here, right now, right? I don't think I answered the question, but yeah, I do feel that choked up about who I was, and that complete despair, and that self-hatred that at 39 I was so far removed from who I wanted to be.
You know what I see from an outside perspective?
Yeah.
Somebody who finally has compassion for the little girl that was just hurting and trying to do the best she could at that point.
Yeah. I have a picture of myself. I think I was 6 or 7, and it's in my house now. And it captures that sadness. I'm just leaning against the wall, this brick wall with a bicycle there. And I look like the saddest little girl in the world, according to my nephew, who's like, I don't like that picture. You look so sad. But I remember looking at that picture over the years and being so disappointed that I disappointed her. And I can say today, I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Right? That's what's possible with recovery.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So true. So how'd you get into recovery? What's the story there? Well,
during my using, I was drawn to therapy, and which makes no sense,
right?
Being drunk, and I remember going to therapy and being like, you can have a drink afterwards. And I had this new...
Well, sure, you're not going to have a drink before. Actually, I would.
Well, yes. Well,
there was no limits, but I was drinking all the time. But
and that's what happened. It was like I had a new therapist, and the appointment was at noon. And I'm like, noon is a long time from waking up to... Even if it's an hour, I'm like...
It really is.
I need a drink.
Yeah.
So I would have a drink before... And again, this is a new therapist. I had therapists before, but they never called me out on it. But she did. And she said, Hannah, if you continue coming in like this, we can't do the work. And I heard her because I knew I had a problem. And the next day, my journey began. And it sounds so much like, and the next day, it was just all, and that's not the case at all. It was a long time coming.
Sure.
Right.
And it's not a switch flipped.
No. Oh my God. It's been a very slow sobriety. Yeah.
Wow. Did you go to treatment, or did you go to support groups?
I didn't. I went to support groups. Yeah. Primarily the LGBT center, as it was called then, and because it was walking distance from my house.
Yeah.
And I also knew that I needed to be in an environment where I felt safe and that it wasn't going to lead to something romantic. And that's where my journey began, and the community that I've continued to be plugged into to this day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
That center saved my life.
How is your life different today?
Oh my God, it's completely different. I mean, I'm fully self-supporting. I take care of myself. Not that that's, I don't mean that in a self-reliance way, but
sure.
I am proud of what I do today.
Yeah.
I've fulfilled, not that there's any one dream, but the biggest dream that I had when I first got sober was I wanted to be a woman that could sit with herself.
Oof.
And I remember seeing people and I'm like, how do they do that? How do they sit on a couch with themselves?
But do you know how much insight that is, even like in recovery? Sober. to be able to have that level of insight that this is something that I can't do, and it's a desire that I have to be able to do, because most of us at that stage are in way too much denial to be able to admit that's something that is a healthy quality to aspire to. So both of those things, that's so unique, I think, to have as a big goal from the beginning.
Oh, I wanted that throughout my whole life. I wanted it, I would see my father sit with his poetry, and I'm like, how does he sit there and write and tolerate what's coming up in him, or what I imagined? And as you know, I wrote a book. I ended up writing a book in sobriety. That was one of my dreams, to go back to writing. And
which is called Strip.
Yes. And the dedication to it is learning to sit in the hours. And so, going back to your question about where I am today, I've fulfilled one of my greatest dreams, was to go back to writing and write that book that I knew I needed to write, that I never thought was possible, and publish it and go on, see that journey through, and it continues. I've gotten to show up in ways that I'm proud of who I am today. I don't look at that little girl in the picture and feel the shame. And today it's, I get to question all of my actions, and even in my thoughts, like, am what I thinking, does that make sense? What am I thinking? The actions I take and the thoughts I'm having, are they taking me closer to a drink or meth, or to or farther away? And beyond that, are they taking me farther away from emotional sobriety, emotional recovery, or closer? And I have the blessing of getting to do that today. And I don't do it alone. It takes a community. I have a huge community here in Los Angeles and beyond. That's everything I always wanted. And I can't always sit in myself, but I have the tools to come back to.
Yes, and that's key. I think that most all of us, except for maybe some of the Buddhist monks that have that have worked so hard, I don't know that it's possible to sit. Even the person that's quote unquote, many air quotes right now, the person that is without trauma, which that doesn't exist, in my opinion. But, I think that we all, none of us can 100% of this time fully sit with ourselves in the present, in our skin. Our society does not support that.
No.
Just
Going to not enough. I'm not doing enough. So how can I be enough if I'm not doing more? And sitting here on the couch at home, looking at, outside is, what have I gotten done today? Right.
Are we on schedule? If you're resting, is this too much resting? Do I deserve to rest right now? If you're working, have I done enough?
Yeah.
If you're calling a friend or not calling a friend, have I been a good friend? Did I call them enough? Did we talk on the phone long enough? All the...
Yeah.
Ad infinitum.
And it just is, it's like a flea. It hops from one thing to the other. Yep. My dream of writing and publishing a book, that continues, the not enoughness. I'm like, I need more.
Yeah. When you notice yourself spiraling in that direction, what brings you back to being grounded? And recognizing your enoughness.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, recognizing it and taking the pause. And then I realized, I have a choice here. I can go down that path, or I can just stay in this, which I often stay because it's just my default of but I don't have time to take a pause. But breathing, coming back to myself, making an outreach call. Nature is a huge one for me, and really coming back to what do I value? What really does matter to me? That helps a lot.
I love that you mentioned nature, because one of two of the big things that have been for me recently that I've been like trying to participate and add more into is any form of nature, whether it's going outside and getting my feet on like stone, cement, feeling the cold, like feeling temperature connected to the skin underneath my feet. Or just being outside and noticing whatever actual nature is out there, even though I live in the metropolitan downtown, but there are trees, there are birds, and the movement. So like, for me, it can be quite simply as, okay, I need to take the elevator downstairs and walk around the perimeter of my building one time. Absolutely.
I got a hummingbird feeder a while ago.
Oh, I love it.
Because I was like, this will help me pause.
Yeah.
Right. Put it in my window, and it helps me to remember to have that breath, to pause, to, and I love what you said about getting out and walking around the block. It's a perspective shift then.
Yeah.
Or a possibility of.
It's, and sometimes people, like from the outside, if you've never started to practice these grounding techniques, some of it, you could look at it from the outside and say, well, that feels like you're just doing more escaping, because you're like, what can I do differently in this moment? But in reality, what we're doing is, because whatever we're in the middle of, whether it's sitting still or we're like actually physically doing something, the brain is stuck in a cycle that has to be interrupted, because we're either spiraling like back and forth, we're stuck in the future, we're stuck in the past, we're not where our feet are.
Right.
And so the only thing that can do that are all these, these various different practices that can bring us back to noticing what's around us, embracing the reality that exists where we are. And we can then start to let whatever we're actually feeling in the moment start to flow through us and be in the present. And there's nothing like being, this truly is, I can't do podcasts all day long. And it's funny, people tell me all the time, and we joke when we sit down to connect, me and friends or strangers that I'm meeting for the first time, oftentimes people they know that I do this for a living before we meet, and whenever like we're meeting for the first time, they'll make the joke, because I can't turn this off. When we sit and meet, I'm gonna, whether camera's rolling or not, we're gonna sit down and start talking deep, quick.
Right. Yes.
Because that's just where I go. But this is where I feel the most like, whenever, with all the faults showing, with all my scars, being the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you feeling safe enough to also be that place.
Yeah.
Meeting another human being where we're both like, it's all that other exterior is stripped away.
It is. This brings me back to the present and what's most important. And that is that connectedness, and going back to childhood and the isolation, not in that place anymore.
Like when you walked in the door, and I'm a big, I know people say this all the time, and sometimes I roll my eyes when people do, but I like, because people are like, I'm an empath, and I really am an empath, y'all. I'm very empathetic, and I pick up on people's spirituality, energy, trauma a lot. And, and whether it's...
That's what makes you a good interviewer.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But when you walked in the door, there is something that like this aura, energy, I don't even know how to put to words, of just like safety, of it's all okay. Like,
Thank
and
you.
What's funny is, before the cameras were rolling, I was making all these jokes about like, myself being like this or being that, and you being so polite and perfect and whatever, and you're like, oh, if you only know, wait till we start talking and all this stuff. And I'm like, but what I was picking up on is just this, like, when you are fully comfortable with all your blemishes, all your past, where you're going, so comfortable sitting in the present where you are right now, the stuff doesn't dictate, like your past isn't dictating who you are showing up with me right now.
Right. And that's taken time. I mean, I remember when I first, got sober and people were like, you won't regret the past. And I'm like, I could never imagine a time where I wouldn't regret the past. And so it's been a slow journey back home, so to speak, right? Thank you for that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been such an honor. And
that journey is something that I never, ever, ever hold lightly or in vain. It is, there are a lot of things we check off with the people we bring on here to interview because we want to make sure that it's a healthy experience for you, and you've gotten to a place, the other person that I'm talking to has gotten to a place where this is a ethically, emotionally, psychologically responsible thing to, roll a camera and open up about and ask you these questions.
Right.
And I cannot thank you enough how this process, to be able to share this with the technology that exists today over the internet, wherever people are, whether they're on their phone, overseas. If you're listening, you're watching, we're talking to you. For whatever reason, you're meant to be here with us today.
Yeah.
For that person that's listening, watching, identifies with part or a lot of your story, I'm curious what words of encouragement that you'd like to leave with them.
That change is possible. I never, ever thought it was. That I have not done this alone, and I can't imagine having done it or continuing to do it alone. So find your tribe.
Yeah.
If that starts with one person, and speak your truth, that all of my secrets that I held kept me in that place of shame. Finding one person to begin that conversation that you trust, that listens, that's the gift right there. Yeah. And that is where possibilities begin.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. You only need one person that you can feel safety with, and then hopefully it can grow from there. But that's one I just cling to so much. Stop keeping it to yourself. Start telling.
And I think that's why, your podcast is so powerful, because when I listen to stories, it gives me permission to share mine, right? Yeah. Maybe not on a public level, but at least with one person.
Permission to share, permission to feel, permission to, there's so much when we've talked about why this podcast is important, what our mission, passion, mission, and vision is. And it's so many of it. It's all of what you just said and more.
Yeah.
Because so many people, whether they're story adjacent, like I'm a mom of someone who just told your story, Hannah, or a spouse, or that might be me. When people are at all connected to the story, there's such a variety of ways that connection is important.
Yeah.
And the validity that people receive from hearing it. There's some level of freedom. And I was telling it to you or someone earlier, if it's even just one person that we can motivate from your story, and nudge them from one stage of change to the next.
Yeah.
Everything we did today is worth it.
Yeah.
And if that person's you're worth it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
This has been such a joy.
Such a treat.
Yep.
Yeah.
And to all of you for joining us on this episode, I will remind you how I always do, because it's the truth. It's never too late to start loving yourself, and you're always only one decision away from a completely different life.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admissions center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.